I ask consent to this statement I'm about to make be placed in a separate part of the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, students of history know that our nation has been shaped not only by those who choose to seek higher office, but many times by those who choose not to. In 1796, George Washington announced that he would not run for a third term as president in his farewell address to America. Although the two-term limit would not be enshrined in law until almost 200 years later, George Washington's actions, choosing not to run for president, largely in response to the nation's heated political climate, set a precedent, a valuable one. In the years since then, Washington's voluntary decision to decline a third term has shaped our nation's conception of political power and the presidency. On Sunday, President Joe Biden's decision to decline the Democratic Party nomination was certainly in the spirit of that tradition. I have known Joe Biden for almost 30 years, a passionate policymaker, a committed representative, an all-around good man. President Biden represents the best of us in public life, and what can never be in doubt is his fierce dedication to our nation. Throughout his entire public career, President Biden put our country first. Through immense personal tragedy, through setbacks and obstacles, President Biden held steadfast in his faith with America. Joe Biden was a senator-elect from Delaware when he learned that his wife and 3 children had been involved in a car accident, and tragically, his wife and a daughter lost their lives. Though living with the pain, which he later described as unbearable, 2 weeks later, as Joe Biden stood by the hospital bed of his 2 little boys, he was sworn in as Senator of the United States. Every day, he decided to take the Amtrak train from Washington back to Delaware. He went back and forth between Washington and Delaware every night to be home with his boys. The moniker we've all become familiar with, Amtrak Joe, was born with that experience. 40 years later, while serving as President Obama's vice president, Joe Biden's son, Beau, died of brain cancer. And again, through personal devastation, Joe Biden continued to faithfully serve America. Because when our nation needed him, when they needed him most, he was always there. 4 years ago, we faced an election that asked us all to face the reality of what we are as Americans. Joe Biden was determined to beat Donald Trump 4 years ago, to bring decency, rationality, and empathy back to the White House, to put our country back on track and restore the soul of our nation. He did just that. In the past 4 years under President Biden's leadership, America has seen an incredible growth, recovery, and progress. Thanks to Joe Biden, we recovered from the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. Millions of Americans were vaccinated. We passed the American Rescue Plan that financially supported working families, addressed the public health crisis, rescued the economy. Normalcy slowly but surely returned to America. Thanks to President Biden, we have created nearly 16 million jobs. The unemployment rate has been at or below 4% for 30 consecutive months. That's the longest stretch in half a century of those good news statistics. Thanks to President Biden, Infrastructure Week went from being a broken promise by former President Trump to a reality. We passed a bipartisan infrastructure law that is replacing our aging infrastructure, expanded access to clean drinking water and high-speed internet, and better prepared ourselves to address the climate crisis we are facing. Speaking of the climate, thanks to President Biden, we took historic action to address the climate crisis through the Inflation Reduction Act, the most significant investment in clean energy, sustainability, and climate resilience in the history of America. And we laid the groundwork for American leadership in sectors for the future with the CHIPS and Science Act, bolstering American competitiveness for generations to come. Because of Biden's leadership, we were able to enact the most significant gun safety legislation passed in nearly 30 years, the bipartisan Safer Communities Act. Thanks to President Biden, nearly $170 billion in student loan debt has been forgiven for nearly 5 million Americans. Prescription drug prices are lower too. We made historic health insurance coverage gains, and the fight for reproductive rights remains central. And as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I'm proud to say that we have confirmed 202 Article III judges, and counting on adding to the federal bench, keeping Joe Biden's promise, the first black woman in the history of the United States to serve on the Supreme Court. And that is only domestically. On a global stage, President Joe Biden has restored faith in America as a trustworthy ally and a world power, a global leader there when the world needs us. For the past 4 years, we've been competing more aggressively with China, rebuilding and expanding NATO, and standing up for democracy and countering the threats of autocrats like Vladimir Putin. The legacy President Biden will leave behind is nothing short of remarkable. A grateful nation thanks him for his dedication to each and every American. History will surely remember him as one of the most successful modern presidents. He acted in the tradition of great Americans such as George Washington. He put the interest of his country and his political party over his personal interest. His decision could not have been easy, but it's a remark of a true statesman. I am honored to call Joe Biden a colleague, a friend, and a fellow American.